All right, we're back. Technical difficulties figured out. We did it. What's up? All right, we're going to get into it. What's up? What's up? What's up? This should sound better. There we go. What's up?
Let's try this. And
Oh,
in
now
your
we're like audio experts. That's good.
is your experience that it's better to be on a Wi-Fi signal or a cell signal for these guys?
Wi-Fi probably if you got it.
That's what I got. All right.
Yeah, you should be
So,
good.
okay.
Sometimes it's that the audio from the mic from your sound cuts into my sound and vice versa.
Right, right, right.
Like being on speakerphone with your parents. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but it's no offense if you're watching, Mom, but it's pretty bad.
Yeah.
Um, so for everyone watching, this is my good friend John Merle. He's an artist, he's a creator, and he's got some. I mean, I just love the conversations we have, and to dive into introspection and much like the creation of art. How do we create within our lives? And so I know you're working on a really awesome project, and I wanted to make sure that we had a conversation about, because I love the way you think about the world and
Mhm.
the way you turn it into magic that is art in whatever way that is. So welcome.
Well, awesome. Yeah, I guess I'll just stop and we'll start there and talk a little bit about it and riff from there, if that works.
Yeah,
So
that's great.
I'm creating a short film called The Opening. And the opening was inspired by just staring into these times, the environmental crisis, the sort of political divide, all that sort of happening in the world. It just felt like the fabric of the cosmos was tearing apart, but we just couldn't see it. And then I was like, but what if we could? What if we woke
Mm.
up one day and all looked up in the sky and there was a giant tear or a rip, a new unifying singular event that had us reframe everything in life, right? And then this hole in the sky acted as a prism. And when light passed through it, it affected everyone it touched differently. They saw visions. They saw like dreams or sort of ceremonial, mystical visions, and they saw their connection with all of life and each other and the world around us. And they began to speak and act accordingly. Because I've been looking at that is what life is. Life is one giant opening, whether it's a leaf or a pine needle or water or air. We're living in a miracle, yet life can also, like living through these screens or living through the daydrumminess can have us fall asleep to that. I know I needed to kind of like be reminded, and I'm around amazing people who are seeking this and seeking conversations like this. And even I fall asleep. And I was looking for like a Copernican moment, when we realized that the sun didn't revolve around the earth, vice versa. Like what in quantum physics is beginning to point to these things, but if there was a unifying event that would just shut us all up from our like, this or that, right or left, and bring us together, and I know even like your logo, the mind and the heart, how do you unify those, and I know that's your great work. And so I've always been inspired by nature. Nature's sort of my original teacher. And I felt like if I'm always blown away when I see the moon or the sun up in the sky. I'm like, we are floating in space here. That is remarkable. And so, what if there was something, yeah, a giant tear that made us contemplate everything and then also gave us individual visions? And so, this is I'm calling it a provocumentary. It's a
I
documentary that
love
asks
that.
provocative questions and they're with no answer. It's an ongoing like infinite question, infinite inquiry to begin to sort of sense make these sort of otherwise trying times. And I think honestly when I see the stagnation in the world, I just think it's a failure in imagination. And one of the things I love about your work is you call it create the love. That love isn't just like there. It is there, but we also have to be engaged with it. It's a process. It's a day-to-day work. And I know you're someone who loves that work, and you get in there and you're always engaging in it. And you also, I thought about why I wanted to talk to you specifically is this giant hole in the sky almost looks like a wound, And we've all,
Mm.
in terms of relationships, we've got this wounding from, a separation from ourselves, from the natural world, from each other. And you love to go in there. You love to go in there and look at those wounds as a way to bring the gifts forward. And so I just wanted to ask you straight up, like, what would you see if you can kind of open your mind's eye and look into
Mm.
this giant chasm, this hole, this yawn in the sky. And these times, what is it showing you?
Well, I love the idea of a tear because, I think that is happening on a micro level within the way we relate is we're really being faced with how do you heal through codependent dynamics that are really birthed through evolutionary, processes and necessity and dependency and all the things that come with being human. And, I feel like we're having this awareness and this awakening to this idea that, how do I hold on to my sovereignty and be in a relationship with someone? How do I love you and love me at the same time? And I think collectively, a similar thing is occurring, which is it seems near impossible, although it's happening. It seems near impossible to hold divergent conversation, like divisive conversation, or that you believe this and I believe that, and what ultimately occurs in these really divided extreme poles is conditional love and conditional community. And when you talk about that tear in the sky, I think we're really at a precipice, at an intersection in humanity that is inviting something to be birthed. So when I look at the sky and you talk about the tear, or the opening is a better term, I sort of see a womb too, the possibility of birthing something. And I just think it's going on such a micro level for us, like within our own intrinsic experience. And it's also going on this sort of magnified, like everything that was implicit is now explicit,
Mm-hmm.
that all the things that corruption, greed, all the things that have always existed and the systems have been formed to support, that require our own consumption and disconnection from ourselves so we consume more. Um, it's all being brought to light and we're being invited to change, to grow, to express, to alchemize.
And one of the things that I've seen too is that in these sort of two dynamics, or the split, at least on Earth, there is something holding us. There is a unifying force called the Earth, right? And whatever's holding that, and whatever's holding that. So even though
Mm,
we're experiencing this, there is some underlying factor. And, I would call that a benevolent love of some sort, a benevolent universal love at some degree, because clearly it's seeing both sides, and yet there is this unifying force. And I'm always trying to, how do we get back to that? How do we stand in that? How do we actually act from that place? And I think that's part of the great work that you do is we almost have to find that internal, listen, I don't think, as optimistic as I am, I think these times are not for the faint of heart, and that's a
yeah,
good thing.
I
It's like
agree.
calling us. It's like calling, it's calling us to sort of find our fiery hearts and what do we stand for? What are we actually going to do with this opportunity called life while we have it, as it can look like the environment and our resources and this miracle might be dwindling from our own actions. What are we actually going to be for as a species, right? And so, how do we actually navigate in these times of you know, like radical disorientation? How do we bear that? Where is our center point? What can we come together for? And I have people in my life that some coaches that have said, if you get two or more people together, it's really hard to agree. It's almost impossible to agree if you get three or more people together, but it's always possible to align. And I think that's a
Mm,
huge distinction. Like even in a couple, like, well, I want green in the room, not sort of like the sage blue. Okay, great. But can we align on, we want our house to be beautiful, right? What are the sort of
right.
principles that we can align on? And then I think this alignment actually would be a place of reconciliation, reparation, and all that, rather than having to agree all the time.
I think you're speaking to something that's so necessary, which is, that mind and heart, the logo being that we often spend so much time in our heads,
Yeah.
that we want to intellectualize everything. Science is important, but it's not everything. It's not the truth. It is a measurement of something that, it validates a theory, but we keep disproving things that we prove with science. We keep expanding our level of knowledge. We keep deepening it. And what's interesting that you know, you mentioned this miracle of just recognizing that you're on this fucking planet in the middle of other planets, and you know, as narcissistic as humanity can be, that we thought it all rotated around us. Shocking. We actually rotate around. We're not in charge.
Yeah.
And what I think is both so challenging to hold that, to know that we are literally, we must surrender to what is greater than us. That's not
Yes.
optional. But in this idea that if we grip tighter or we get more certainty, we'll know. And what you're inviting, at least what I experienced you inviting through your conversation, is how, like, if you will open up to the miracle that is all of this, like you said, through, you know, nature, you know, you can look at a pine cone and you're like, this pine cone is also a tree right now.
Yes.
Just not realized. And I think that's so true for all of us, you know, like everything we're learning, we're just growing into bigger oaks, you know, we're just figuring it out. And we return more to our hearts. We come back into our hearts because what beats our heart is this unknown energy, this unknown magic, which is so, like, when you just think about it, you could just get sort of swallowed up by the mystery of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think mystery is so key, and I also think that, you know, Richard Rohr is a Franciscan spiritual teacher. I like to call him the Dalai Lama of Christianity because I think he's like upending things from the inside out. And people always ask him, like, where do I start? Like, where do I start to believe in God or something larger than me? And he says, if you can hold a pebble in your hand and kind of begin to see, how did I get here? How did the pebble get here? How did my consciousness pick that up from the ground? How am I looking at it and being aware of it in my hand? If you can't find and begin to contemplate God there, you're never going to find it in some like dogma or deities or organizations. It's just,
Amen.
it's almost like we're in the ocean of God, of the mystery, but we're trying to, you know, give ourselves a different sort of center of gravity. And I think that
Yeah.
the mystery allows for humility, you know, and from that humility, we can begin to engage with the unknown. Richard Rohr also says the mystery isn't it's infinitely knowable, not just infinitely unknowable, right? Infinitely knowable. We can continue to learn more and more and more. And that to me excites me. And these are the questions that I want to ask because, like you said, with science, everything that science is referencing is this world. Like it was already there. Science didn't it doesn't own it. It's kind of might have discovered it, but it was already there, you know, like
Yeah.
if you look under a log and there's a salamander, it's not like you discovered the salamander was living there before you kind of, you know, got there. And so there is like even a colonization, even in science, like saying we own this, we found this. And, you know, I think that we have to sort of, has to come like where science and spirituality meet. Where do those two meet? Where is the unknowing? You know, and I love discoveries and innovation. I'm totally for it. But what is it serving? You know, and even I love the idea of consciousness, and consciousness, even like conscience, is cone science with science. You know, like with the divine science, with the science that's we're swimming in science. You know, everything's science. Biology is science, right? It's our immune systems are science, right? That's all. We're living in this thing, and we're also living in things that, like science, when you get into the quantum physics realm, do not know, there's no reference point. There's things that don't make necessarily sense in this physical realm. And so to point to that beyond what we know allows for an awakening, it allows for a humbling, it allows for new possibilities rather than this sort of day-to-day. And when all this talk about returning to normal, I understand it. I have my creature conference. I want it too. But I'm like, what about returning to difference? What could different look like? You know, because there's a lot of normal that wasn't really working out. So how do we use this? And so, you know, when COVID and the pandemic hit, it felt like like a glitch, like a little hitch, we could get off the treadmill for a second, you know, like, whoa, here's a little moment here. Can we get off there? And that's why I call it the opening. Like, here's an invitation, right? It was more invitation than incidents to actually meet the world where it's at. And, you know, you don't need a hole in the sky to do that. All you kind of need is a moment of recognition of stopping and smelling the roses, or looking into your lover's eyes, or being fully engaged and giving yourself wholeheartedly to something. You know, Brene Brown talks about that. What is wholehearted, you know, activism? When you're fully here, and that allows for something to be all in. And I know one of the talks we had, I think one of your favorite quotes is, you know, you had to go beyond the shore. right? The shore of what's
Mm.
familiar. Once we're up, you had to like kind of say, I can no longer see the shore of what I know, because when I'm there, I'll just attach to what I'm comfortable to. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but it allows for a limited perspective. And if we're going to go beyond this, like we're in this thorny impasse. And so how do we let history sort of guide us? It's like we need to go there, but we just can't stay there. And we've just been in this cul-de-sac of, staying there in these same similar conversations again and again.
Yeah, it feels like we're at this intersection where all of our inabilities to actually create unconditional relationships, the skill sets that we need in order to surpass them, like listening, like understanding, like not needing to be right, all of these on a micro level and a macro level needing to be so important. And I mean, you spoke to so many things that really just sort of stir my soul. The one is that in order to even be like, if you're just present to uncertainty, if you're just present to what is going on in the world, there's a grief there because we've spent so much time in the denial of the miracle that is this. And also acknowledging, because you use the word humility. Humility is such an important thing. In order to be in good relationship, one must be humble because we have to realize that we're wrong. We have to realize that we're not getting it right, that we didn't say that thing right. And it requires this massive humility for humanity, but of course that starts from within in order to accept that we actually have no clue. Like we have no clue how this all works. We have no understanding. I kind of laugh when they talk about DNA and they're like, well, just 90% of it's junk DNA. Oh, it's junk. So
Mm-hmm.
because we don't know how to measure what it does or that it might work in other realms or in other
Right.
dimensions. And even the thought of that, well, that hasn't been proven, so it must not be true. Like this arrogance that actually
Mm.
disconnects us from possibility
Yeah.
and even when I think about how society normalizes things like breakups, you should despise your ex, you should do this, you should do that. The idea that I remember this chef Yoda, she's incredible. She said to me that she was once told that when you leave a relationship, you should leave it as if you're leaving a house. Like you should
Mm.
repair it
Mm.
before you sell, like or
Mm.
move on. And I love that. To me, that means so much. Like, where is that normalized? And
Mm-hmm.
in order for us to move forward, I think in humanity is that we have to reach into those spaces and change our behaviors. We have to, I mean, I think we're really being called to integrity on such a high
Yes.
level. Like, for self, we have exploited the planet. And this is that capitalist mindset that just has said more money at the cost of everything. And I think companies that are willing to exploit the planet, they are obviously, I don't think I know this, they are willing to exploit people because the
Mm-hmm.
planet is people.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets so wild and complex. And I think it's so important that we need to hold on to what is the untangible because it's what is the guiding light through this. Because, as you said, how do you be alive today? It's not for the faint of heart. It requires that we step into our warrior power. It requires that we still hold a beacon of love. It requires that we become unconditionally loving beings and that we take our pain and alchemize it ourselves to expand and become better people, humans, partners, whatever that may be. And by doing that, we actually do that for the earth. Because if I care for you in a different way than I've ever cared for other people, and I care for myself, there's no way I can step on an ant anymore.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that brought up a few things. So one, I love that the word integrity comes from integral, which means simply putting parts back together, gathering the parts, making whole again. And so, yeah, in this complexity or the separation, that is the sort of work to do with ourselves, with partnership, with others, with the world. But also, I heard this quote that said, intimacy is the highest form of discipleship. And I love that because it's not just in partnership. It's like, so as an artist, and it goes back to that Brene Brown wholeheartedness, when I'm like single focused working on a drawing and rendering for hours and hours, I just lose track of time, space, anything because I'm no longer here. You know, I'm immersed in the process. And so being intimate with, I mean, you know, listen, I don't do this all the time, but when I can think and stop about it, actually taste the food I'm eating, you know, and sit there and be with that, be present with you even over these pixels. Like we're not going to have time to, you know, we don't see each other all that often, you know, we always love it when we do, but it's not like I get to hang out with Mark all the time. And so
Yeah.
how do I actually be intimate with the moment and be present, be where you are at all times? But I love that as a form of discipleship. And actually, I do think a lot of people, you know, are looking for Dharma, looking for their calling, looking for their purpose. And sometimes when people say follow your passion, they may not know where that is, right? And then, but also I've heard that another place to look is look out in the world and see what breaks your heart. You know,
Mm.
that's that wound, that's a place of entry, that's a place of engagement, how to enter. And so, you know, creating this wound in the sky that gives people visions and gives people a sense of purpose and a sense of, I am here for something greater than just paying my bills and being in a system that may not be looking out for the best of me. How do I see that I'm a part of more than just the human world, you know, with the nature, with the trees, with the microbes in the soil, with the ancestors and beings behind the veils. I know that's what I'm wanting to do. I'm striving to, and you know, it could be said because we don't know either way that our own unwillingness to see that keeps the veil in front of us. Like
Mm.
it cements what we can and cannot see. So I'm always trying to look not just with the physical eyes, but sort of with the mind's eye, the eye of the heart, and see from new perspectives constantly.
By agreeing to not see the miracle, you agree the miracle is not there. I love that.
Yeah, that's the
That
subconscious thing, right?
right, right. And it's such conditioning because, of course, no baby is born with this idea. Like, you know, there's a line from Alan Watts, one of his lectures, where he says, "You can watch a baby try to poke the moon," and I love
Mm,
that because they have no concept. No one's given them rules yet for how it all works, and I think that's what, when you start to sort of feel into the unlimited nature of it all, the possibility, the potential, you are in a form of rebellion, right? You're sort of like now saying that, like what you said, go find the thing that breaks your heart the most in the world. And
yeah.
that's a good entry place. Yes, hell yes, because that you care about that thing. You
Yes.
care about that thing dearly. And if you care about it, then you might find the thing that matters to you more than um, staying the same, right? Like a motivation that says, I found something that breaks my heart, that I'm willing to do the work to change, to fix, to solve, and I think using that word integral is maybe a better use there, which is to like integrate, because you're just going and picking up pieces of things that matter to you and putting them back in your heart, you know?
Mm. Yeah, and you know, if people are looking for their calling, I like to say, well, what's calling you? You know, what's calling your heart? And that could be what
Mm,
breaks your heart. That could be what excites you, right? But I think we're like, oh, I got to find a passion, or oh, I got to find something to do here. No, no, what's calling you? Like life is
yeah.
interactive. Life is here. You know, life is. That's what I like to say before. Like I'm trying to live where my life itself is the path, the practice, and the teacher. How do I be a you know as good of a student as I can be here and present? Yeah.
Well, I mean, the birth of my work was through pain, right? Through being like, shit, I don't know how to make sense of this, and no one's ever taught me about relationships. Why has no one ever taught me about relationships? This is so important. And I remember just being sort of enraged at first that I felt like
Mm-hmm.
I'd been lied to when my Catholic upbringing said that everyone just gets married and stays together forever and they're happy. And I'm like, that's definitely bullshit. But I didn't
Mm-hmm.
see that till I got out of a relationship and I found
Mm-hmm.
myself not on the train that everyone else is on. And you know, I have a friend who sort of used that metaphor, saying like, I was on the subway. Everyone's on the subway, getting the job, doing the school, doing getting married, doing the
Mm-hmm.
thing. And he's like, and then his wife left him, and he's like, I felt like I just got two-footed off the train, and I was standing on the platform. And I was just watching the trains go by.
Wow.
And he's like, for the first time in my life, I was still. I was
Mm.
actually saying, do I want to be on that train? And I think heartbreak, in whatever way our heart gets broken, is an invitation to stand on the platform to say, do I want to
Yeah.
get on that train, or do I want to go build a train? Do I want to go get on a train with
Mm.
other people that are passionate about the same things? And I'm
Yeah.
curious about the birth of your art. Like, where did it come from? When was the first time that you're like, oh, I can I can make really magical things appear that didn't appear before?
That's my favorite process in the world. Like really to like have it live psychically or in the sort of daydreamy space of vision, and then to bring that into this world is that's magic. That's like a miracle. And I think, I had a first grade teacher who took my parents aside and said, I think we have an artist on our hands. Because,
Mm.
that most kids are drawing like stick figures and your son's drawing facial features and embroidery on clothes. So really like
I was the stick figure kid.
you were the stick figure kid, yeah.
Still the stick figure kid.
And I it was nature. It was basically drawing nature. Like I grew up in Vermont, and to hop in the lakes and rivers and catch frogs and turtles, and I loved looking under things and then being able to draw. And I was a perfectionist. I would just draw and draw and draw again, and I would draw and like, oh, it's not perfect. I'd throw the paper away, and my mom and dad had to be like, we need to get you an eraser so you can do this again. You're not just wasting paper all the time. But then so I went to art school, and then my art merged with my philosophy. And that's really where I'm at now, where like I'm looking at my creativity and my spirituality and where those two meet. And there's something emergent that happens where I can actually question through art. I can actually make a provocation. I can actually show something to the viewer who's like, wow, that made me think. That made me stop. And that's actually the work I love doing the most, is has this double entendre where it can reframe your whole life. Like I never saw it like that. And I think I had a teacher in art school who taught illusionism, drawing illusionism. You've seen MC Escher's work where it looks like, someone's kind of going upstairs that are impossible. There's aspects of
Yeah.
that. But she really taught how the mind sees one thing and the eye sees another. And if you begin to play with that, play with perception, you'll hit them on both levels. And so that
Mm.
was really in college where I began to know that any art, there's an aspect of art that's made for beauty, and there's an aspect of art that's made for psychology. And
Mm.
both touch the soul. Psychology is just the study of the soul.
Right.
And, I think what psychology has become now is like the study of the brokenness, our disconnect
Yeah.
from the soul. But it used to be the study of this, you have this lifetime companion called your soul. It's with you on the whole journey of your life. And it studied the miracle of that connection. Now we're actually studying the disconnection. Here's your wounds, here's your sort of patterns, here's all this, like, and trying to heal that rather than saying, no, no, there is a healed place within you. This is an unbreakable cord. And how do we study that and enhance that? And I felt like, yeah, art was really a place to hold up a mirror back to that miracle, back up to perception, back up to consciousness of people. And, you find your audience. Same thing, Seth Godin, who I know you've interviewed, says, not for you. And not everything you do is not for everybody, right? But
Yeah, he's great that way.
I've found people who love my work, love thinking deeper, love looking under things, love considering
Mm.
things, love being clever, love, And I just made, when September 11th happened, actually, we can go there. I had
Yeah,
a
let's go
spiritual,
there.
I had a spiritual awakening. I kind of like when I saw that, I began like it was like my mind's eye just opened, and I started channeling a film. I just started channeling things. I'm like, whoa, I'm an artist here. I do take two-dimensional. Like, what is this? But I've been taking dictation ever since, and it just opened me up to something where it actually it burst my bubble. It burst my sort of little like the world's sort of perfect. I'm going to go in there and kind of like get on that subway like you talked about, and just fine. And that just came in there and like re-rendered everything for me. But I and
As
I
it
kind of
does.
had I kind of had this soul moment where I realized whatever caused this, whether it's terrorists, whether it's an inside job, whether it's conspiracy, who like it doesn't matter. Like it's still people killing people. This is like
Yeah.
evil. This is evil. And I just made my an inner vow of saying my art will always be against whatever did this. And I will sort
Mm.
of put my heart and my art on the line to go up against this and sort of unify people. And so, that's actually, there's been moments. It hasn't been like one big giant moment. There's been incremental moments, and there's been breakups, and my parents' divorce, and my dad passing away. All these things have kind of been places where I've needed to process, and art has been a way that I've healed myself. I don't even know how I feel about something until I make art about it. And so the opening, to come back to that,
Yeah.
is I'm trying to sense make these times, because the world I believed in, the world I idealize, isn't here anymore, and I'm doing desperately both to protect it, to preserve it, and to create it again, in new ways, and to look to new places that might reinvigorate and re-inspire a new way of living and interacting.
What an invitation that is. You spoke to the soul and the psychology being influenced through your art. And, I think that's why I love our conversations, because it's so, my art is, I didn't know it was, but it became a similar invitation of like, like when you're heartbroken, it is such a gateway to yourself. It's such a passage into finally listening, finally loving, finally touching your soul,
Yeah.
finally going back. And it feels like sort of like a super highway back, where you're done with the bullshit. You can be. And, a lot of, I never thought of, actually, this isn't true. But when I was like young, I certainly saw relationship as sacred, but in a way I saw it as sacred, but in a bit of a codependency, like I was willing to self-abandon in order for that sacredness, which actually doesn't treat it as sacred because I'm not treating
Yeah.
myself as sacred. And I really started to see, and Kylie was a big birthplace of this together, was this recognition of like, how do we create a relationship that is about nurturing the sacred between us, but also within each of us, independently and together. And that opening that currently exists, because you said the world I sort of envisioned isn't currently here. And, it kind of is like the salamander under the tree. The salamander was always under the tree. And I think we're in that moment where we're lifting the tree, and you're doing that through this what was the word that you used for it? Provocumentary?
Provocumentary.
And
Yeah.
that's so great.
Yeah.
And I
Provocumentary.
love that, because art can remind us of the soul. It can remind us of what we've forgotten. It can hit us in both those places where all of a sudden the mind gets out of the way because we're feeling something. And we
Mm-hmm.
want to go back to our head and say, what do I think about that feeling? And it's like, leave it. Just let yourself feel it. Let yourself be drawn towards what makes you feel like there's magic. And your art does that. Your art is it's incredible. It is on like this other level of sort of, I
Mm-hmm.
see the complexities of all the dimensions that are being
Mm.
expressed in,
Thank you.
what is seemingly a drawing. But you look at it and you're sort of lost within the mysteries.
I love that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. What was I just going to say around that? I lost it. I lost it because I was listening to you compliment me.
Well, what a good thing to be present to and
Yeah,
to appreciate. Well, for people listening, how,
yeah,
because, clearly people have enjoyed this conversation, how might they find so they can support the opening, and when
yeah.
do you expect it to come out and all that kind of magic?
Sure, sure, sure.
And
So I'm
where can they
currently,
get your work too?
yeah, yeah. So I find as an artist, Instagram has been a great tool to put out my art. So just at John Morrow, that's where you can find it. JohnMorrow.com. I'm a JONMARRO. And the opening I'm currently doing an Indiegogo campaign right now. I'm trying to raise money. I found this
Yeah,
amazing special that Mark's contributed so graciously. Thank you. Um,
of course.
I'm raising money to find. I have a special effects artist who's incredible, who's worked on um, he worked on the original Matrix, he worked on Star Wars, he worked on the Avengers, he worked on Harry Potter. So he's just been involved in mystical films. He's done a lot of medicine work before, so he's sort of
Wow.
peered behind those. So we've definitely kind of connected. And you can find that campaign through the link in my bio right now. That actually runs for,
Yay.
it ends actually next week. It ends next week. So any contributions would be so helpful. And I've already shot the thing. I'm editing it now. And it's actually a proof of concept for a much larger piece. So this will be a little short film that can sell a larger vision. And I'll give you the 1 minute version of that. I've been watching like the Game of Thrones, the Harry Potters, the vampire and apocalypse movies. And I loved the first 7 seasons of Game of Thrones. I thought it was amazing, like weaving together this mythology and everyone is
Yeah.
a protagonist. I loved it. And, but I'm looking at them like all these people are saving a fantastical world while this world is burning, while this world is falling apart. So what I want to create is a story, and I've done this. I've been writing it for years, since September 11th. That's the film that started coming through.
Wow.
This film that I think it's an episodic television show now. Originally, it was a film, but a long movie through episodic television that has a hook, has a mythological hook of humanity, but gives real world practical solutions about regenerative agriculture, about sort of relationship connection, about mindfulness, and allows us to save and unite in this world. So, and I think that the screen, this is where we're going to meet people. This is the water cooler of today's age. If it's not going to happen here through the screen, I don't know if transformation will happen because everyone is connected through this place. So
Hmm.
this opening is a little proof of concept, where I interviewed friends and mystics and teachers and asked them what they saw when they stared in the opening. And I also want to
Hmm.
do that in this larger piece of have people like yourself and luminaries speak, like experts, or not even experts, just people who are fully engaged in their topics, and we can go to this life school through television, and there can be
Mm.
the part that speaks to the mystical and the soul, and there's going to be a part that speaks to the social. So how to bridge the mystical and the mundane. That's what my life is
Perfect.
about.
What a bridge. What a perfect
Yeah.
place. And what we need now is bridges. We need
Yes.
bridges between extremes, between thoughts. The bridge is unconditional love. It
Mm-hmm.
is the space that holds two poles. It is necessary. It is both the yin and the yang.
Yeah.
Um, well, my friend, thanks so much for being here. We'll make sure, so if you want to help contribute to this vision of John, make sure you go to the link in his bio
Mm-hmm.
at John Morrow, which you'll see in the caption. And much love, my friend. Thanks for your time.
Thanks so much, Mark. Talk soon.
Of course. Chat soon.
Peace.
Peace.